Hello, everyone. For those tuning in for the first time, welcome. And for folks who've been following us along this year's theme of restorative justice in the criminal legal system webinar series, welcome back. My name is Avery Arrington. I use she and her pronouns. I'm one of the assistant directors at the National Center on Restorative Justice. We're picking right where we left off in August from our last conversation, where we hosted former and current seated judges talking about restorative justice. But folks, today we're in really good company for today's discussion on restorative justice education in the carceral system, where we're excited to hear from so many panelists involved in this work. So don't forget to plug your questions in via the Q&A chat. I will be monitoring the questions and handing them off to our moderator and panelists, and our moderator will remind you of that as well in a moment. But after our webinar, we encourage you to visit our website at ncorj.org, check out some of the other National Center initiatives, the research developments and educational opportunities we offer. And as always, these opportunities and resources are free of charge. At the conclusion of today's conversation, I'll briefly plug November's Restorative Justice Month events that will be happening. But before I turn it over to our moderator today, special thanks to our funding partners, the Bureau of Justice Assistance under the U.S. Office of Justice Programs, and our National Center partners, Vermont Law and Graduate School, the University of San Diego, and the University of Vermont, and their commitment to improving policy and practice through restorative justice research, public education, and higher education. I will now turn the discussion over to our moderator for today, Dr. Kathy Fox, a criminologist, justice reform advocate, and professor in the sociology department at the University of Vermont. So over to you, Kathy.
Thank you, Avery. Welcome, everyone, to our webinar. We have a fantastic crew. Looking forward to it. My name is Kathy, and I use she, her pronouns. And as Avery said, I'll be moderating. And I will introduce our panelists in a moment, but I wanted to set the stage for why we are here today. As Avery mentioned, this is part of the National Center on Restorative Justice's training division, where they have webinars for all kinds of different topics. But quick overview for anyone who is unfamiliar. Restorative justice is a conceptualization of justice that entails communication between all of those affected when a harm or crime is done, including the one who committed the harm, focused on repairing the harm and taking accountability for one another in relationship. Currently, RJ practices that happen inside prisons are kind of a patchwork of efforts in various places. For example, restorative processes can occur in the form of dialogues between those who have been harmed and the person who did the harm. We don't really have a good handle on the information about where, what kind, and to what extent RJ practices are happening inside carceral settings. However, we do know that teaching RJ inside prisons is happening and taking distinct forms toward different ends. And this is the focus of the webinar today. There are 2 points that I want to make to frame this discussion before we get started. First is one of the wonderful and notable things about RJ education in prison is that much of it is grown and developed organically by people inside. And that impact moves beyond the walls and back inside again, which also provides a measure of hope for those that are still incarcerated. And I know from teaching inside that learning from other incarcerated individuals is arguably much more impactful than someone without lived experience like me. Quickly, I'll explain what my involvement in this subject is. Lindsay Pointer, who's the PI in the National Center, and I developed an RJ curriculum to teach inside the local women's prison, which we piloted. And then at the prompting of the superintendent or warden at the women's prison, she wanted me to teach the women how to teach it. So this summer I taught 8 women inside how to teach it, and they incorporated some of Minnesota's curriculum and some of their own ideas and really took off with it. And recently they just taught it to their first group inside. and created a restorative justice council similar to the one that they have in Minnesota. Many thanks to Tito Campbell for his generosity. Next, they're about to teach it to staff and management, and they're kind of off and running. The second thing I would note is that restorative justice education inside carceral settings has pretty expansive opportunities. For example, some people develop the curriculum to provide a way of thinking differently about holding themselves and others accountable, or as a way to make amends. Others may want to change the culture inside to try to teach people how to practice living more restoratively in an environment that is not particularly restorative. Others may want to create opportunities for leadership, role models, or healing from trauma, from racial injustice or other kinds of trauma, and to engaging with communities outside the walls to give back. So there's a huge range of reasons that that different restorative justice curricula have developed, and the practices both inside and outside. And I'm sure there are other ones, both intentional and unintentional benefits that our panelists have experienced, and I'm looking forward to hearing from them. So without further ado, I will introduce our panelists and then explain the format of the webinar. So first of all, Jerome Nunn is a devoted parent and deeply rooted in his faith. While incarcerated, he helped to create the Restorative Justice RJ 101 curriculum and was a leader and mentor to his peers and to many members of his community. And today, RJ 101 is used in Minnesota prisons statewide. Tito Campbell is a restorative justice specialist for the Minnesota Department of Corrections and a lead response in reducing violence in facilities projects. Tito is a formerly incarcerated person and served as a restorative justice council member for 10 years before transitioning to a central office point person position for all of the restorative justice councils in Minnesota Department of Corrections facilities. Stephanie O'Reilly is the Director of Restorative Practice Education at the Maine Correctional Center in Windham, Maine. She has worked with both the juvenile and adult populations in corrections and is enthusiastic about curriculum development and training, particularly in motivational interviewing and restorative practices. Eric Anderson is a returning community member, poet, mentor, chef, director, father, human, a lifetime student of restorative practices, and a self-proclaimed street kid. He has over 8 years of leadership experience with restorative practices and community-based initiatives, and is passionate about working with young people and helping them navigate the system and re-enter the community successfully. Joseph Mapp is a restorative justice practitioner who is passionate about ending mass incarceration and turning the school to prison pipeline on its head by engaging in prison to school work. Following his release from prison, he continues this work as a program manager, director of Reentry at Precious Blood Ministry of Reconciliation, a restorative justice hub in Chicago. Dr. Elena Quintana is the executive director of the Institute on Public Safety and Social Justice at Adler University. She's dedicated her career to community violence prevention initiatives, meaningful justice reform, building trauma responsive systems, and contributing to racial equity efforts. The format for this webinar will be that I will pose certain questions to specific panelists for whom the question is most relevant. And at the end, any and all of the panelists can weigh in on those questions, as well as questions from the audience. But the Q&A will be monitored by Avery as we go. So we're going to begin with a quick question for each of the panelists. What is bringing you joy this week? And let's start with Jerome.
Hello, everyone. What is bringing me joy this week is the opportunity to serve my community on a broader and a wider range and scope than that has been available for me in the past. And so it is bringing me so much joy to meet the needs of others that need the help or just need a hand up. And to have that opportunity is just special, and I honor it and cherish it.
Let's move to Eric. What is bringing you joy this week?
Lucky for me, this week is actually my birthday week. Sunday's my birthday. So I actually want to get to spend this weekend. Anyone from Massachusetts knows Salem's like the Halloween town. I got to go the first time this past weekend in my life. And I'm gonna take my kids this weekend. I throw the full costume on. So I went as Scorpion last weekend. I'm gonna go as a skeleton this weekend, and my baby's gonna mask. So to me, that's gonna be my joy with my 4-year-old and my 1-year-old, just being able to enjoy some holiday spirits and a fun birthday. My daughter's birthday is also the 1st of November, so kind of be like a double celebration. So
How about Stephanie?
Hi, this whole process is bringing me joy. It's bringing me in connection and community with so many amazing people up here in Maine. We often feel very isolated and far away from the rest of the world, particularly with restorative practices. And so this is just an exciting opportunity, and I'm just very, very thankful for that.
Tito?
Well, this week, I believe I get to go into a place that I was held for like 10 years, and I get to speak to the gentleman and create this program that we're putting together here in Minnesota. Just the inspiration that they give me, the conversations that we've been having about change and about having a heart for this change, it's just been giving my soul, my spirit just so much joy. And just on a side note, I just got a call in, hey, my truck is done finally, so that's good. With that, I'm gonna pass.
Okay, I think Joseph and Elena are the only people left, correct? So Joseph.
You're on mute.
So I think what's giving me joy this week is a couple of things. First, being here with you all and being able to lift up community and the work that's being done and share with one another and learn from one another. I think this is really a humbling experience. But also, so in my role, I do 3 things: policy advocacy, community engagement, and direct service. The most joy I get is the direct service, when you can hear from an individual who share a successful moment. And this week I have an individual who struggled for a while and now is finally moving into their own apartment for the first time in their life. This is something that really gives me joy.
Hi, I'm Elena Quintana, and I am very joyful this week because not only am I here, but also I spent the last couple days talking to legislators as well as 100 incarcerated men in Nebraska State Penitentiary, as well as people who work in the prison, about how restorative justice is a trauma-informed approach, and just all about the way that when you practice restorative justice, you also address trauma and how much there is such an important overlap there. So I'm excited to be here too.
And I am in Vermont, and the leaves are at their peak wild color. So that's giving me joy at the moment. So all right, so this will be a question that I would like everyone to answer, which is for you to just explain restorative justice through an example or a story, and it could be your own story, but something that you think really captures the restorative work that you're doing. And I guess we'll start with Jerome again.
Restorative justice and my entry to it was an experience from a VOD, a victim offender dialogue. There was a mother by the name of Mary Johnson, and she runs a program called From Death to Life. And she was in a process of really trying to find some reconciliation and some healing from the loss of her son. And what I experienced that night was beyond my understanding. And it changed me and it gripped me. And it was something that wouldn't let me go. And I didn't want to let it go. And I seen the possibilities through restorative justice, what could happen that I never thought could happen. And from there, it's been 16, 17 years of me participating, me finding ways to enter this philosophy into the facility where I was formerly incarcerated and help other people have this same experience and see the possibilities. It has been, again, a life-changing experience. And I'm just grateful that I had the opportunity to witness that. And so that was my introduction. And I'm here, and I'm just a great advocate and a committed advocate for restorative justice.
Thank you. Stephanie.
So when I was thinking about this question, I couldn't help but realize the personal impact, I believe. So when I started in the profession, it was through the juvenile system. And our juvenile system in Maine is heavily influenced by restorative practices. And it's such a wonderful thing. And I used to work only with youth, and I would say things like, I don't want to work with anyone under 10 or over 24. I don't like anybody outside of that parameter. And something happened that made it so I had to come to the adult system. And to be honest, I was a person who at that time, which was only 2.5 years ago, and practicing vulnerability here, so please have grace for me, but I was a person who believed to do the crime, to do the time if you were over the age of 24. I was not, I did not have the same outlook on with work with adults that I did with the juveniles. And then I said, hey, can I teach a class in restorative justice up here at the adult center? And they said, of course. And in my first group there were 11 men, and they were all what we call, and I apologize for the terminology, it's accepted here in Maine, they were all long timers. They were, men who were looking at 40 years, ranging from the ages of 18 to 72. And through that process, and we did class and we do class in circle, and we get to know each other. And through that process, I will forever be thankful. We call it the group happened to be the DWAC of a particular unit. And they have impacted me so profoundly. We joke and say that now I look at the men and the women, but the men that I work with here, and they're just hairier versions, bigger, hairier versions than the kids I used to work with at the juvenile program. It has totally impacted my frame of work, and I, to be honest, probably would not go back to the juvenile side. So just showing how it can, getting to know people, building community can impact people.
Thank you. Joseph.
Thank you. For me, I would like to speak about a point when my belief in restorative justice was heightened, because I started a personal track on my own to become a better person, to give back, and to move away from the person I designed myself to be when I was on the other side of justice. But this is a moment when I actually seen restorative justice as exemplified in the form of a mother who lost her son to violence. And she was able, thankfully to Elena for bringing her in, and this was during when a period in my life when I was incarcerated. It was an entire room full of incarcerated men who've done serious offenses. And when his mother, Lisa Daniels, walked into that space to share space with us after losing her child, it humanized us, made us believe that we was much more than a worst offense we've ever committed in our life, or we was much more than the terms that they placed on us, inmate, convict, prisoner. But it made us feel like people that was humbled in front of a woman who lost her son, and talked to us about how she was able to move beyond that and try to seek ways to create right relationships with the individual, that not only did she speak for him not to receive the punitive form of justice, but a restorative form, to where she made a connection with him and tried to commit to walking with him during what little time of incarcerated he received and after. I think that example of restorative justice speaks volumes, where words can only kind of frame something for you, but cannot capture the entire picture. That act for me has created a conviction in me to know that restorative justice is not just an idea, but a way of life I not only want to live, but communicate to the rest of the world in hopes that we can move in that direction.
Eric.
For me, I like to share, for me, restorative justice is kind of an example I got when I got to enter back into the Department of Youth Services here. Having once been there, spent good part of my juvenile life inside the Department of Youth Services here, going into the state system and meeting individuals and going back there and actually being able to teach restorative justice to their sons, being able to tell their stories, being able to tell their paths. And just one individual that was very close to me, whose son I got to meet while going inside of the Department of Youth Services, being able to debunk the stories that his son heard about him, being able to explain his father's journey of, his wrong while he was in maximum security, as he found himself, as he progressed himself into becoming the man that he wanted his son to see. Being able to give that story in the same fashion that he gave his own son. His son looked at me like, oh my God, was my father writing the letters while you were standing there? Was he telling you the story while you were standing there? But to give him that reassurance of, our elders and our ancestors, what restorative justice based off is learning. To me, is learning from our community, bringing back that village that raises our children. So being able to be that example for that young man, for me, is everything. Being, as I said, going back inside the Department of Youth Services, where I spent countless times, being able to speak to my younger self, in essence, was a blessing, and being able to share that story throughout my journey, even back to him, to give him some hope and a clear vision of what life can be. And, I guess what I hope in the end, more belief in his father's words that, son, we're going to be okay. When I come home, I'm not that person you heard about. This is who I am. This is what we're going to do. And for him to take that wholeheartedly, to me, that's what restorative justice is. It's that community building on that level, being able to pass down the words from our elders and our ancestors.
For me, restorative justice, I'm going to tell a story, how it affected me in my personal life. At 33 years old, I found myself in a situation that I could not, that my money, my mouthpiece could not get me out of. I had created a situation where I caused a life to be taken, even though I did not intend to take that life. It happened, and I was facing a lot of time. And me personally, coming from where I come from, when you do things intentionally, it's an intent behind it. And when you do something that it's that you didn't mean to do, it hit me a different type of way. And there was no way that I could bring back the person who was taken away. And at that time, I was searching for avenues and ways to, not to redeem myself, but to become someone who can speak to others that they wouldn't follow the same path that I did. So I had a relationship with a gentleman that approached me to do a PSA in prison. And as doing this PSA, he was very well known in the community as an advocate for for the DWI, driving for dads against drunk driving. And when he approached me with this, and I did this this PSA, I just kind of like just spoke from the heart and who I was. I found myself, like I say, this is my first time ever in prison. The longest time I had served before that was just 4 days in county jail. So I was looking for a purpose, and I found that purpose in restorative justice. I was introduced to the Restorative Justice Council here at Stillwater Prison in Minnesota, and Jerome, my brother, was a part of that council. And mind you, on that council, I believe everyone that was on the council at the time had served 10 years or better. And here I come, fresh, not even down a year yet. And they accepted me into that council organically. And it was people inside the prison that was probably waiting to be on that council, because it's a very prestigious kind of council and role that you play amongst the prison and inside the prison. And just for them allowing me to take space in that place, it restored me. It restored me to a place where I could be helping to other people in this system. And I'm like truly grateful and honored that happened, and that my brother Jerome, I mean, he's my brother, he's my friend, he's my brother, he's my confidant, like, and I'm just so appreciative to that. Now we're looking at 14 years later, and because of that, what they did for me, now I'm in a position here at the Minnesota Department of Correction to be able to do it from a different level. And I just think that's restorative, and that's just how it is. Because when you are a part of restorative justice, it's a healing within yourself, but you're also able to speak towards others because you have walked that walk, you have felt that pain. And when you come to a place where you are at full remorse and want to do right, it shows forth itself. And I'm just grateful and thankful. And yeah, that's what it is for me.
Elena.
Try to be brief. In 2006, I was working at the head of evaluation for a large violence prevention organization in Chicago. And I worked with about 150 formerly incarcerated coworkers who were working as outreach workers and case managers and violence interrupters in Chicago. And it was such traumatic work. I would constantly have a line out my door of people who needed help for one reason or another, just because they ran into something difficult, or they wanted me to deal with a grieving parent, or they were threatened, like things like that. That was like, I had a full-time job, but I also had another job of just providing help and support to all of the staff that was on the street doing this work. And in the middle of this, there were a couple of families that I'd worked with closely, and two of their sons that I had worked with for a while were killed. And I had started a hospital program where I'd answered all the calls from like half of the city of Chicago in terms of trying to stop retaliation. So I was constantly on the phone, constantly in the thick of like trauma, violence prevention. And I felt like I have to just keep going. And in the middle of it, a child that I had helped to raise, my cousin's son, was killed. And everything just stopped for me. And at that time, my good friend and mentor, Father Dave Kelly, said, "Hey, I want you to come to this restorative justice training." And I really learned it's not, I think that there's a lot of definitions around restorative justice, but what's really emphasized here, especially in Chicago, is this whole idea of being in right relationship with others, that no matter what it is, whether it's in like, any kind of program, it's about being in right relationship, having spaces that support the full expression of who you are and allow for the development of your human potential. And that is like kind of a very broad definition of what restorative justice is. And I was so like run ragged that being in a space with all of these luminaries of restorative justice, it was like an all-star cast that was doing that training in 2006. And I feel very grateful for being invited. But I learned an entire new way of being in right relationship with myself, and then being in right relationship with people that were never in right relationship with the systems around them. And so I just kept had this very long, decade-long meditation about what it means to be in right relationship. And then later, as I learned more and more and more about the science behind childhood adversity, I started learning how well restorative justice works to is so trauma informed. So that's kind of the reason why I came to know and love restorative justice for my own trauma, and then it was immediately applied for in such a beautiful way.
Thank you, everyone. So let's dive into the teaching part, the curriculum, curricula, because I think that's probably why most of the people are attending. So what I'd really like to know from each of you is, explain the origin or the authorship of your RJ teaching, what you teach, and how did it evolve, and what is the impact that you've seen inside a prison or prisons. And I don't know who wants to start. Tito, how about Tito and Jerome? Do you can tag team this question?
I'll let you start with the authorship, Jerome.
Again, through the experience of seeing and witnessing Mary Johnson, I like to say RJ found me. I didn't find RJ. Just through that experience, it was just hard to let it go, and I believe it didn't want me to let it go. The possibility to see the levels of healing that Mary Johnson expressed to the ultimate of forgiveness was just transformative. And so to be able to capture that and share it with the population was just in my spirit. It was in my spirit in such of a way that I had to go research, what is restorative justice? What is this about? And so I came across just many materials about what restorative justice is. Howard Zier is a big advocate for it. And I wanted to be able to gather the information to create something that was palatable for men to digest and be able to grip it and want to be involved and share. And so I just took the time to go through multiple materials and put something together that will be interactive, that we can learn not only through curriculum, but through dialogue, through visual, and just through examples. And from that, we birthed a 6-week program and Restorative Justice 101. It was just instant hit, so to say. It was popular. It was very attractive. People was waiting to get in because our desire was to be able to bring every culture to the table, to be able to give them a voice and to help each other learn from one another, but to show the possibilities of healing. And from the day we started it in 2006, it has never stopped. Every 6 weeks, there was another class after that. And so we were just introducing this to the population because we wanted to be able to make a difference and give people the opportunity to have levels of healing and to make things right as much as they possibly can. And to be able to connect with things that have been suppressed, connect back with humanity, and fulfill some of the desires that I know was living in people to make things better and to become a better person. It has fulfilled all that and some, and it's in the state. And I'll pass it to Tito and he can share some things.
Yeah, I would say like me facilitating those classes was probably the highlight of my prison sentence. Because you know everyone's a skeptic at first, but with the materials that we had, that Jerome and a couple more other fellows had put together, it had layers to it where it breaks you down, or not break you down in a bad way, but break you down in a way of your guard coming down for you to find that humanity within yourself. And so teaching those classes, I love to see the first day when everyone used to come in and they were looking like, man, this is some type of fairy tale that you guys are finna, you know, put upon us. And yeah. But by the end of that 6 weeks, I mean, you would see people transform to different people. They are truly finding within themselves, and they're not just doing it with themselves. They're finding right relationship with themselves, and then they're seeking out to heal the relationships within their families, within their significant others, within their children. I think that was like one of the highlights as well, is to see someone really understand the trauma that they've caused, not only with them in themselves, but to their family, and that web of relationship, and how that web of relationship needs to be healed and repaired. And so I saw gentlemen year after year, class after class, going out beyond the class to their families, to their friends, and repairing those relationships and being able to speak about it. I think as men, sometimes when it comes down to personal things that we find that are hard to talk about, we don't talk about them. And through this class, we touched on like some real personal things, and real things that made people, like, you know, grown men cry in front of other grown men. And that's something in prison that's kind of like not heard of. You're not supposed to do that. But we were in a safe space where that was the thing, and people felt good to share that. And like, so when we did start the class, we would start the class off with like values, like that we wanted to uphold throughout the 6 weeks of us building together. And everyone got to come up with these values, and everyone held true to those values and respected those values. And I think with those types of things, it carried itself back into the units. And those people that went through the class, I think another one, I'm skipping up before myself. I think Jerome failed to mention that this is not a required course. Everyone who has taken this class through Minnesota is volunteering. And we have not one time had a shortage of people taking this class. Some people took the class more than once because they found it so impactful. But even with taking it again, they always got something new out of it. So now we're in the process of creating a 102 because of the thirst of that. And we want to keep that same spirit of diving in deep and understanding within self that you can heal out. So the impact that I've seen over the years of restorative justice being taught inside the prison is very valuable. Even now, we're implementing certain things that we're trying to do with staff to be able to, you know, introduce them to restorative justice, to, you know, create a space where they're comfortable as well, and understanding that, I mean, we may wear different clothing, but we are all human in the core. So I think that's very important, and that's the journey that we're on right now.
One more thing that I would, you know, add here is for most people who are incarcerated, people overlook their experience with victimization. And so RJ was a vehicle to help them also deal with their victimization in their life, in their journey. And so to create that space was important to recognize them, and to have empathy for that as well. And that was a big deal in the space too. And so healing was just taking place on all levels, and that was intentional.
Can I make a statement about two curricula, just I think to be a resource for people out in the world? We do one group called Healing Beyond Harm, which is an apology letter, support writing for people in prison. And we use a curriculum out of Ahimsa in Oakland, Ahimsa, AHIMSA. They have a curriculum called Empathize that they use to help people write letters of apology within the prison system. It is a fabulous curriculum. They have another one for people out in community, and I forget the name of it, but they're a really great resource. There's another curriculum that we use in our regular CAVE course, and that's community anti-violence education at Danville that also Joseph was a part of. And we use the Self Manual by Sandra Bloom. And the Self Manual is not specifically created to be a restorative justice thing, but if you use it, you implement it in Circle, it allows people to kind of systematically unpack trauma within a restorative process. So just for people listening that want some resources, those are the two that I think are really good.
Thank you. That's great information. Eric and Joseph, did you want to respond to the question about curriculum? And then we'll move on to the next question about the challenges. Either of you.
You're on mute, Joseph. Go ahead.
So if I had the opportunity to respond, and Elena just eloquently introduced the Self Manual, which stands for Safety, Emotion, Loss, and Future. This is a way, and Tito spoke of how in a hyper-masculine environment like a prison, people are leery about being vulnerable. This curriculum creates this space where we can take complex language and put it in a way that's articulable to the people that's using it and understandable to the people that's engaging in it. And that way it creates a safe space of vulnerability, honesty, and as well as compassion for one another's story. We're guided by sanctuary principles, 7 principles to be exact, which those principles are nonviolence, shared governance, social learning, open communication, and I probably left off 2, forgive me if I did, but these guiding principles help steer us in the space that creates this opportunity to right relationships through first learning how to forgive yourself for whatever trauma that you've experienced. And once you begin at that spot, that place of forgiveness for self, you can move into spaces where you're able to forgive others if they've caused harm to you. And I think that's a true actualization of social justice and restorative justice.
Do you have anything you want to add?
No, you can move on, Captain.
Oh,
And thank
okay.
you, thank you all 3 for your answers. Beautiful.
All right. Well, so thinking about other people that may want to introduce RJ curricula into a prison setting, what have been some of the challenges and how have you overcome them, which I think you all have. So, and anyone who wants to answer that can jump in.
I can start off. Sorry. I think one of the most challenging parts of implementing this inside the prison system is staff involvement. I think that's where we find our hurdles at finding staff to be a part of this, or to even just have the heart for it. I think a lot of staff, that come into the job, they may come in one way, but then they get introduced to a theme that seems to go throughout prisons, and they fall to the wayside, and they're not kind of doing some change at that time. So I think introducing it to staff and finding staff that want to volunteer their time to help and to help facilitate and create this this thing that we're doing. I think that's where we found the most hurdles at. I think, through the population that's there, I think those hurdles they're easier because I think we select the correct people, like, and I believe too, like, restorative justice finds you. And when you have the heart for it, it just comes about that way. So having the correct men and women facilitating these classes and doing these things and walking that walk, not only just within inside the classrooms, but also in the blocks, I think speaks volumes. And once you have that, people tend to believe in it more because they see it in you. So with the population, I think it's more easier. It's just with staff, I think we have the most issues with.
Oh, go ahead, Eric.
Oh, I was gonna say I agree too. Some of the challenges with staff. Something I learned in the Department of Youth Services was some of the challenges with staff, but out here in Mass, they have a little more connection to their families. It's really being able to draw the families in and do that wraparound service where everyone's learning the same principles. Everyone's building the same safe container and guidance along the way, and able to share that. Something I know we were able to do, and during their events where family was able to come inside or just be able to share out information, or like we did when I was at the Transformational Prison Project, we'll do turkey giveaways to their families and things of that nature, and give out the pamphlets, give out the different ideas. That way they had a better communication when they're on the phone, and those phone calls ain't talking about what's going on in the neighborhood or in the streets. It's talking about, what are you doing in there? What are you learning? What is this principle? What is that principle? And they're able to build on it all the way around in their life. Give that wraparound look per se to themselves. Was something I seen was a challenge, but something I feel like we was able to combat quite a bit in being able to offer that service. Even, I always gives credit to Bobby, who would run around town dropping off turkeys to every family, shaking, saying hi to every mom, making sure he passed his number, and keeping communication with everybody that was close to that young man or young woman. That way they knew that they had a community around them, not just us, but a community that even when they went back home, their community had an understanding of what they're learning, so that it was better practice once out.
So interesting. Thank you. Stephanie, I think you were about to say something too.
Yeah. So from a perspective of a correctional staff without lived experience, it's, it's a paradigm shift, and we're fighting policy, we're fighting community and politics, and really even staff and resident perception of what is restorative justice and what is the purpose. And we've been blessed here in Maine. We practice the Maine model of corrections foundational principles: humanization, normalization, and destigmatization. And so restorative practices has become trained upon entry for staff. Residents take classes and participate at whatever level they can. It really is about bringing people together. We utilized a listening circle format to actually sit. We invited 40 staff and 40 residents to participate and together and have conversations about what does normalization in a prison setting look like, and just the outcomes from that, and the changes in how people interact together. I'm a huge believer in, build it and they will come, show them and they will fall in love with it. It works. And so that's kind of how I approach us overcoming any of those barriers. But we're currently working on the policy side, and that can only enhance the work.
address the challenges?
I would add to this the ability to introduce something new to a system that has been functioning a certain type of way for decades or years can be very challenging. To help others buy into a process that can bring something different because of the history is a challenge as well. And making sure you have the proper atmosphere to be able to introduce something new to the system is critical. You really have to walk through a real strategic plan to introduce something that seems so at some point not trustworthy, to speak. To trust this process, it challenges you to open up parts of you that most of the environment don't allow. And but when you do get an opportunity to break through, it's beautiful. And so, and I believe we're here because we had opportunity to break through. But it is important to gather a strong community of supporters on both sides to be able to walk this philosophy into this space. And when you're bought in to restorative justice, you know it will produce exactly what you're desiring it to produce. And so them are some of the things that I would add also to the challenges.
Anyone else want to address that question? No? All right, then let's move on to the next one. This is similar, but and maybe you feel like you've answered it, but I'm wondering about the challenges or the barriers to implementing restorative justice more deeply into the system. So, for example, creating an alternative discipline system or something like that. Has anybody any experience with that?
Well, that's something that it's a hard fight up the hill with that one because of one thing prison holds truly is security, and discipline is a part of that. But with the program that we're putting together, this RJ mentorship program that we're implementing here in Stillwater Prison, piloted in Stillwater Prison here, what we're doing is we're taking RJ philosophies and we're putting them into the hands of the community to be able to handle and actually have conversations before violence, after violence occurred, and the reintegration of when you come back from either SEG or the SHU unit. So we still haven't touched discipline, but we're implementing ways and programs to sprinkle restorative justice around. And I believe eventually, because of the alternatives that we're putting on the table for people to, take part in after something has happened, has a lot of restorative values in it. And so we are opening the door, but that is a hard one. I would speak so for my standpoint.
It's not for the faint of heart. It's a fight. It's and even when I have the most supportive system here in Maine, and it's okay, you got to write the policy and you have to do that. There's a few gentlemen on this today, hi guys, that are actually incarcerated right now, and they're on a laptop in their room watching this, and some we're actually working on a policy to bridge adult incarcerated peoples with juveniles, both in the community and in an incarcerated setting, in a restorative mentorship program. And some of these gentlemen are working on a policy committee with myself and our policy gurus up at central office. And so it's wonderful to see, but boy, is it slow work. And so you gotta just keep the heart and keep moving at it.
What Stephanie mentioned about that the hard work, it is hard work because there's a whole culture. There's been like this entire culture, and you know, a lot of times when you're doing restorative justice, you're just working with incarcerated people, and it's not working with the entire staff that's experiencing the same kind of life-changing treatment. Like last month, I was actually recording our group, the Community Anti-Violence Education Group that's in Danville Prison in Illinois, for a podcast. It's a podcast that's not out yet. It's called Change Agents, in case you're interested. And you know, what was interesting is they put a couple of corrections officers to just be there. Like usually we're unsupervised, and there was a couple corrections officers that were there, and they were like, one of them got so choked up that he had to like leave the room as he was like listening to this whole thing just unfold. And then another one was so dumbstruck by something that somebody shared that he actually asked me to leave the room and turn off the recorder. And I thought, oh no, what, you know, like what happened? And this corrections officer was like, I need this. I need this healing. Like, I really respect what you all are doing. I mean, it was like, it's a whole system that is very difficult for everybody that's in it. And so it's hard to deeply change policy and practice if everybody's not exposed to the same kind of change agents. So I wanted to say that, but I also want to say one of the things that's been very successful in Illinois is that we have a lieutenant governor who is a restorative justice practitioner who hired 2 formerly incarcerated people on a very high level to make policy and for the state. And so we were able to change a number of things. And at the same time, we had the most progressive director that we'd had in years. And that was then we were able to change so many of the things that were allowed. And so when you have these kinds of wins of having people in high levels welcoming people in, the people with lived experience, to make the policy changes at high levels, you start seeing more of an idea of justice as healing rather than justice as punishment. And that's what we're working toward.
I wholeheartedly agree. On our juvenile side in Maine, they've been practicing restorative practices for community corrections as well as within the facility for about 20 years. And, you figure in 2001, there were 2 juvenile facilities with over 400 residents. We call all incarcerated people in Maine residents. And now we have an 86% diversion rate from court on the juvenile side, and we're down to 1 facility with about 35 kids in it in the entire state. And if that doesn't speak to what can be happening, and I just need to shout out to the juvenile side, the work that they've put into doing exactly what Elena was saying about the staff have to be involved. It works. We're starting to see it up here where I am. It's amazing when people just sit and in community. And we talk about this as a community, which is a little uncomfortable for me because I'm not incarcerated and I get to walk out the door every night, and that doesn't seem fair. But we're trying to figure out these things, and we have these hard conversations, and it's amazing work.
Anybody else, Joseph or Eric, would you like to talk about any challenges or barriers in terms of making systems change?
Yes, I think as it was previously mentioned, it's getting the buy-in from as many as people that can benefit it as possible. It's accepting the belief that it is a real tangible benefit from it, as opposed to shifting the metric for how we measure success. What does that look like? And I can give an example of successful practices when you build a space into which restorative justice principles can be implemented, and it lends itself beyond the prison walls back into community, where community is built across community. When you have individuals who were once considered rivals, when we didn't have a mindset of how to be in community with one another, now being best friends and showing up at each other's weddings or creating spaces after prison to continue what was started within prison. I think that example of how to continue and to influence policy or even lift up what is possible. I think restorative justice takes an approach that's not necessarily risk averse, that it begins to take chances in an environment where security seems to be primarily the focus and not the allowing space for true growth and change to happen. So I think the challenge is, how can we begin to start the conversations in these spaces that we are in and continue the conversations to people that can affect these policies? So it's not always a direct approach of talking to the person who's in that position and trying to convince them to a new way of being, but to talk to politicians and state reps and anyone that has an ear that can affect change about what is possible.
Thank everyone for the answer. I think I'll just add, having been able to work with an organization called Community for Restorative Justice, that's been doing restorative justice diversion work for the past 20 odd years out here in Massachusetts, throughout the state. Seeing district attorneys, police departments turn over cases to go to restorative practices. And if I'm candid, this being more in the white dominated neighborhoods, but to seeing that on a broader scale. For me, the criminal justice system is just a system. It's what we're trying to change. So until the powers that control it, until the DAs don't have the control that they have, until the judges don't have the control that they have, and the survivors of these incidents and these crimes are able to actually have control and have a voice, until the community is able to actually have a control, have a voice inside the criminal justice system that's supposed to be for the people, there's going to be these challenges. And I think that's really our hardest challenge, is being able to take the power back from the state and back from the people that say that they work for the people in the community, and giving that power back to the community, where they're answering the wrongs, they're answering the incidents that happen in their community. I think that's the real focus challenge that we really need to overcome. And I got to see in working with communities for restorative justice how some of those youth were able to turn their lives around by being able to bring their community members in, being able to work with the police officers within their state, within their towns, being able to work with the district attorneys within their towns that lived streets over, and being able to build that safety net through mentorship and through community overall, because it was actually their community, it was their people. It wasn't just me walking into a courtroom seeing John, and John came from 50, 100 miles away out of the state, and I don't know him from a hole in the wall. He don't know how my community operates. He don't know anything. But having people that's actually a part of the community be a part of the process.
Thank you. I get Joseph kind of started to touch on this, but what are the benefits to the facility? Like if you were, trying to convince someone in central office about the benefits of having an RJ curriculum or an RJ council or, something inside, what are the benefits to the facility? And anyone can answer that. I
can answer that. Something beautiful I think we did in the Department of Youth Services when there was a dispute between the staff and the youth there. The benefit of being able to create that restorative practice, we used to actually hold a restorative, in mass, the staff walk the unit You know, the youth meet right on the youth. And so any meeting you have with the youth, staff are listening. They're there, they're present, and they can't go with one staff per five youth. It stays that way. And being able to have that process go on and on and on. And when they ran into the dispute, it was kind of quite easy to be able to bring them all in a circle together. Staff, you sit down, you sit down, and we created that space where now even staff can speak like, I'm just tired of y'all not listening. I'm just tired of this and you, I'm just tired of y'all not listening. But they both hearing it. Y'all both just not listening. But it gave them a moment to sit down and listen, for lack of a better word. But being able to create that, I think that gives the facility a tool to be able to cause a lot of disputes, to be able to sit down and have create safe environments and safe containers that are not just grievance processes or slide or this process where this person is just trying to tell the story to get a benefit. It's done amongst everybody. It's done in the open. It really helps to solve that problem and solve the incident or whatever might be happening in that facility.
Joseph, I see your hand is up.
Thank you. Now, I don't profess to be an expert about trauma and how it reproduces itself, but I can speak that prolonged trauma creates a learned sense of helplessness. And unless that trauma is addressed, it will go on to create cycles that has been lived out in the past. What the benefit to having restorative justice curriculum and practices instituted into a facility is that you create a mindset for individuals of how to approach and deal with conflict, how to ensure that you're striving to stay in right relationship, not just with individuals or your peers, but with the entire population, with the entire staff. It also creates the opportunity that these effects of restorative justice practices can extend beyond the classroom walls and go back to the living units. And oftentimes you have individuals who can serve as peer mentors and peer inspiration and aspirational pursuits, because of that level of engagement, you have people who strive from not only going through this process, but it's probably an uptick in educational pursuits. It's probably an uptick in how to extend these relationships or improve relationships with family members that was once strained. Restorative practices can lend itself into every sphere of not only a prison system, but also a social system. And if we really recognize the benefits of it and think about how to institute policies, because it begins with a mindset and a philosophy that, hey, how do we write relationships? Because from relationships, all other programming experiences can be improved, if not implemented in a way that can be life affirming.
When I get the opportunity to train, you know, I often ask people, you know, how does institutionalization of people? So when we come in a punitive manner, we come in and tell people what to do. How does that translate to positive outcomes? In the community? And the answer is it doesn't. Like, if we are bringing people in community, working on the effective communication, problem solving skills, doing all of these things within restorative practices, it can then be applied outside. We have seen a significant drop in assaults on staff, assaults in between residents. We now get requests for roommates to, hey, could I get a nonviolent communication mediation? Or, hey, I need a circle with this because of this topic. And, you know, and one of the gentlemen spoke to the grievance process, and I had somebody come today and say, hey, this issue's coming up. I'd prefer not to do the grievance process. I'd rather sit down and have this as a conversation. Okay, let's go. Like, that's the type of stuff that is just exciting to be doing.
Anyone else want to discuss that question?
What I would add also to maybe some of the benefits is that when you can witness a person mature, get healthy internally, you can see better outcomes for him or her. It's contagious. You will get a safer community. You will get better relationships. And I believe, like in Minnesota, we do have a commissioner that recognizes that and have seen the progress and supports it. So it allows for us to continue on in Minnesota in a way that helps have, because the ultimate goal is to have safer environments and get people home out of these institutions and back to their families and, back to society and be contributors on another level. And I just believe that when healing takes place and there's a proper process of healing, you will get better relationships. You will get maturity on another level, and you will get a safer community and better ideals on how to go forward with each other. And it's a benefit and it's a win-win across the board. And so just to note that.
Tito, do you want to address that about the benefits to facilities? Because presumably central office sees it, and because they're institutionalized in all the facilities.
Yes, the benefit is kind of like what everyone spoke about. I mean, holistically, it's going to bring a safer environment for everyone to be a part of. But I also believe that it really breeds true rehabilitation, because it has to start with yourself and within yourself. And once you start that self journey, like everyone said, it is contagious. You want to spread that message, because you want to show everyone, or for everyone to see the growth that that you've created for yourself. And Jerome spoke. Yes, we do have a commissioner, Paul Schnell, that truly believes in. He's a restorative justice practitioner himself. He actually used to be a restorative justice professor. And I remember the first time I met him, it was one of our darker moments here in Minnesota. It was our first officer who was killed on the job in history. And of course, that was a situation where it never had been happened before. So it was a lot of us against them mentality, like to the fullest. And I believe one of the first words I ever told him was, this us against them thing is never going to work. And restorative justice and understanding of restorative justice, it brings people together, and it makes you commune on a common ground. And that's a human common ground, not a staff, not an inmate, but on a human level. And I think that's what we're doing here in Minnesota now. We're trying to get back to that, because we know that creates a safer environment, that creates a healthier environment, that creates a productive environment. So when people do return back to their homes, they are sustainable in their successes. So I believe the benefits are immense, and that it should be continued. And if you don't have it in your state, look within it to start it, or reach out to us to help you start it, and we can get it done.
I want to allow time for questions, and it's 4:16. But I did have one last question that specifically was going to be tailored to Joseph and Elena, but anyone could answer, about how you think teaching or offering restorative justice in carceral settings can address racial equity, inclusion, harm issues.
Joe, do you want to go? I mean, I have an answer that is like hot on my mind, so I'll go ahead and jump in. And that is, the way that prisons are created, it's to get everybody to submit and to fall in line. And when you are doing restorative justice, and it is a flattened hierarchy. It's like everybody has one voice and there's democracy in the process. Everybody gets to speak, everybody gets to form an opinion and voice their opinion. And it allows people to be present in their own lives and to have their own ideas. And I think that in terms of emotional intelligence, it absolutely gives a safe space for people to fully be themselves and be able to develop their own ideas and express their own thoughts, opinions, and feelings. And I think that that is something that creates safe spaces that otherwise aren't readily available in prisons.
Anybody else? Joseph, do you want to answer it, or anyone else?
I think she covered it, especially if you're thinking about recognizing that there is a component of historical trauma and systemic trauma that exists within a prison setting. So if we believe in moving in a direction that begins to heal from both and begin to humanize one another, that we can see each other as not what's wrong with you, but just recognizing that something has happened. How do we be accountable to one another, address the harms that did occur, and work toward healing? And I think that's a process that if we begin to think in those terms, it can address a lot of the racial and systemic injustices that happens within the prison and a larger society.
Give anybody else an opportunity to weigh in on that?
We hear you utilize listening circles quite a bit, and when I actually did my training for listening circles, the topic that I chose was systemic racism, and so that opened up this dialogue, and out of, for lack of better terms, curiosity, particularly around Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday a couple years ago, and being from one of the whiter states in America, I invited all the men of color to a celebration on those days for the last 2 years, and we talk about the impact of slavery, the impact of all of this, and out of those conversations have come a desire to next year include everyone in the conversation, and so I'm looking forward to being able to do that. I think it breaks down barriers. And we see it also with different types of offenses. I think, most people know that there are levels of offenses, and certain offenses nobody wants to connect with or be connected near or whatever. And here, I mean, we have a very safe environment where people can have discussions about how certain things impact each other. And I just think it's a great opportunity for all of us to break down all of those things. And I'm not a person of color, and how else am I going to learn unless I sit in circle and have that conversation, and learn from those impacted by potential racial, sexual, whatever, religious belief, all of the above.
So we have 10 minutes left, and I don't know if there are questions, Avery. And if not, then I would love to just hear what people think should be the next frontier in RJ education. What's next? What are you? What's your hopes and dreams? But Avery, do we have questions?
We have a couple, if you don't mind. So one is a technical question. Where should I begin? One is specifically Jerome and Tito. Someone was asking, and thank you all for submitting questions and comments, and I see folks connecting and dropping your emails in, and it's really gaining some momentum and some energy around this particular topic. So thank you all for just your interest in saying, hey, how do I get involved? Where do I start? This is a technical question. How many participants do you think folks, if you can estimate, Jerome and Tito, how many folks do you think went through that 6-week RJ 101 course? How many folks, because you said that you were starting new cohorts every 6 weeks. So if you can give a ballpark, what do you think was those numbers? And I know I'm throwing you on the spot, so just for
I would say we had anywhere between 16 and 20 people in a class. We did that every 6 weeks. We took a 2-week break in the middle of the class and started the 6-week back up. So roughly in a year, you add that up.
math. Do the math, folks.
Yeah,
Math
do
is
the math.
mathing. All right, pull that calculator out.
I also would add that because of the growth of RJ 101, it went to other facilities in the state, right? And so there was continuous classes in these other institutions that never stopped or took a break because of the waiting list was so long. And so in one facility that I was at, the last class, it was class 98. And so this is a number of at least like again 16 to 20 plus people. We're talking from 2006 to present. So we're in thousands, I would say. People have taken this class and
Hey,
learned.
also,
So
I
I'm
would
giving an
add,
answer for y'all too. They said 7,000 people gone through RJ 101 in Minnesota facilities.
also I would add that we also have people from the community also taking these classes coming inside the prison. So that's another beautiful thing as well.
Thank y'all so much. And yes, I see someone did put that in, approximately 7,000 people. So talk about spreading the movement of, this is probably a 2-part. How does the curricula and programs you were all engaged and prepare participants and staff and leaders? How do you talk about that RJ is a journey and that success and healing aren't linear? So what does that process look like where folks may fall back into old habits in their interactions and relationships? So how does that kind of, I guess, is incorporated into the RJ journey, given that success and healing aren't linear?
Well, I will just mention that, Tito, I think you had mentioned about, like when one of your people in your groups is, sort of not holding up the standard expected out in the units, that people take this person aside and talk to them, and that there are sort of expectations and demands on their behavior, and that you sort of mentor them, I guess, for lack of a better word. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I mean, like we want people to not just be able to speak the word, but actually walk it out. So I know me personally, I have a thing, I don't want to be a hypocrite, because if I tell you something or tell you to do something or give you some advice on something, best believe I want to be able to do that myself. So I think your character speaks volumes in that type of system for people to believe in it and to see it really work. So when we do have people that's on the council that have, slipped up, we do take them aside, have a conversation, see where they're at. And depending on that, the group, the council comes to a decision on should this person continue on or should they step aside for, a period of time just to redeem themselves to get back in it. So we just don't disinclude anyone because we know we're not perfect. And that's why RJ is so important, that RJ meets you where you're at. And if you do slip up, I mean, it's not that we're giving up on you. We're just gonna set it to the side for a minute and revisit it at the appropriate time.
Okay, and Elena, this one's for you. You could reiterate. I see you were responding in the chat, but it'd probably be helpful just to kind of openly talk about some of these questions. And by the way, a lot of these questions are very specific. I will, if it's okay with the panelists, I will be sure to send out your contact information because folks have some really dialed in questions on how to get involved in this work. But Elena, if you can share really quick, and it's a two-parter. There was a question about getting pushback from staff or politicians who may not think that RJ in a carceral setting is appropriate or feasible. And then there's another question about legislation, so legislators being aware of the benefits of restorative justice and how successful it can be. And I liked your answers that you talked about politicians really don't know that much about specific programming that's happening. And then in terms of what it looks like in a political spectrum, restorative justice, as folks you may or may not know, it's a controversial thing. It depending on who you talk to. There's some folks that have some really strong opinions about what it is, what it's not, and a lot of things happening in between. But Elena, if you could go ahead and expound on some of your responses here.
I just think that when you talk about restorative justice as one thing, it's confusing because it's kind of a philosophy, it's an approach, it can be applied to many kinds of different programming. And so it is important, like for example, if I had to work in a state where restorative justice was not readily accepted, or like there were even political pushback, because I know that had come up negatively in some states. You know, the program that we have in Danville, it's a violence prevention group. It started as a violence prevention group. It's incredibly restorative. It's totally based on restorative justice. But do we talk about it as restorative justice? No, we talk about it as violence prevention because everybody wants a safer prison. It's better for everybody, all that sort of thing. And so how do I talk about it? I talk about it as violence prevention. And so you have to kind of meet people where they are. And also, people who are negative about restorative justice often don't understand it. So those are some workarounds I've used.
Thank you. We are coming up on time. It is greatly appreciated. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you for all of the energy and enthusiasm around this particular topic, attendees asking questions. I want to go ahead and make a few announcements as we close out. In one moment, making sure that folks. Okay, so a couple of things. Here's a couple of reminders. Please visit ncorj.org for more information. We are approaching Restorative Justice Month, which is the month of November. There are going to be 4 webinars we are hosting. One about more information on the coaching program we're hosting. 2 introduction to RJ and the criminal legal system webinars, both offered in both Spanish and English. And then a healing and accountability dialogue discussion. Criminal legal system refers to this as a victim offender dialogue. We have changed the language and shifted the language on what that discussion will look like. And then at a later date, we'll disseminate the Restorative Justice Education Curriculum publication that was developed by Dr. Kathy Fox and Dr. Lindsay Pointer. And that will be available at a later date. Just another plug, don't forget to fill out the webinar feedback form that's available after the webinar. We will send that out with the recording. And keep those topics coming. We specifically ask, what do you want to learn about? Some of these topics that we are offering come out of those feedback forms. For instance, folks we kept hearing about and topics about, hey, we need this restorative justice information and education offered in Spanish. So one of our webinars is specifically developed and coming out of that feedback that we're hearing from you all. So I just want to encourage you to continue. We have tough skin. Continue to give us those critiques and that feedback. And like I said, we will continue to learn together in terms of how we develop these webinar series. So once again, thank you so much to all of the panelists. We will make sure that you have their contact info available to you all to continue the conversation. But if there are no other final thoughts or anything else that needs to be said, thank you all for attending and take care. Thank you, folks.